Marci Grossman is a CPA with over 30 years of experience helping individuals and businesses to manage their financial needs. She is a financial literacy educator, author, and speaker passionate about encouraging people to take control and improve their relationship with money. In plain English, sharing true stories, she helps people to better understand the financial decisions they make every day.
Nice to see you all here. And as she said, my name is Marci Grossman. I'm a CPA. I'm a financial literacy educator, and I work to help people better understand their money because, you take driver's ed, you take all these other classes to learn how to do things. And money, we just kind of say, hey, here's money, everybody earns it, figure it out, see you later. And if you're lucky, you find some financial advisors that help you and talk to you in English, and you improve your understanding and make good decisions. And if you're not, then you create challenges for yourself and just make things harder. So my goal is to help people better understand their money and improve their relationship with money. So I think, what have we got here? So we've got about 30 people here. So if you have something you want to add or question, I guess you can, they have the hands up or something on this so that you can do that. I think 30 people talking at once, I wouldn't be able to figure anything out, but I do like when we address questions within that time frame rather than trying to remember and double back too much. So we'll see how that goes and adjust as we go. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about money. The first thing to know is money was invented centuries ago because they needed a medium for exchange for people to be able to get what they wanted from what they had. And you didn't want to have to go through a whole series of barter to get from your eggs to a pair of shoes. And money made this a much easier way to change what you had into what you want or what you need. So the first questions to think about, and this is really where I want to have participation, is when were you taught about money? Because for most people, for many people, you taught about money. It was something you picked up as you went along. Whether it was at the point in time where you started getting an allowance, at the point in time when you started working a job, whether it was part-time or as a kid, helping out, collecting cans and bottles and turning them in depending on where you lived, and then making those decisions on your own. But how were you taught about money? Again, were you taught about money? Or was it the school of knocks and you went in and you kind of learned as you did, oh, wait, I don't have money for the candy that I wanted at the candy store because I spent it on a comic book, or vice versa. I like both candy and comics, so I was always short of cash. And who was it who taught you about money, if anyone did particularly? Because a lot of times our parents would say, okay, I'm going to give you your allowance, and a certain amount goes here for savings, or a certain amount goes here for your lunch money, or whatever it is. And they helped you break it in, but they didn't necessarily explain to you, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is why I am telling you this is what you do, because I want you to start building these habits. I always love to hear stories about different ways that people did something, because as many people as I talk to, always there's something new. Someone did something, someone's family did something in a way that I hadn't heard of before. And I love to be able to broaden my knowledge and experience by hearing from yours. So now, who do you talk to about money? Maybe you talk to your partner, or maybe you talk to your friend when your partner goes out, has a midlife crisis and buys a car and didn't happen to mention it first. Or Maybe you just talk to yourself because you're not sure anyone wants to listen to you. Do whatever talking about money you have to do to let off steam and feel you're in a place to have broader conversations. And who do you go to with money questions? So do you have a financial advisor? Do you have a mentor of some kind that you can go to with these questions? Maybe it's your CPA, maybe it's your parent or your older sibling or younger sibling or best friend that you can go to get more information. And of course, let's turn it in the other direction, because who do you mentor about money? Whether you have children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews or family friends, or even just friends of your own that you know more than they do, and you're helping them to learn more and improve their relationship with money, because this is how we're going to learn, and this is how we're going to improve the overall financial literacy, is by asking when we don't know and sharing when we do know.
If you want to take a question, I do have one in the chat.
I'll take it.
So Robert says that we live in an age of scams, and do you have any comments on that?
So scams are one of the most important reasons to talk to other people about money, because so many of the scams can be caught if you talk to somebody. If you get a call from your friend that says, hey, I'm in Turkey and I have no money and I need you to send me gift cards, the first thing you should do is call your friend and see if they're in Turkey. And if you can't reach them, who can you call that might know if they're in Turkey? Or if someone calls and says, hey, I'm with the IRS, because usually when these scams happen, they're reaching out to you to have you give them money. And the best thing you can do is take a stop, and talk to somebody else to bounce it off the wall and find out how you double check. Because, we make jokes about the African prince that's going to, give you $1 million if you send him $1,000 or give him access to your account. But we all know that one now. So theoretically, none of us will fall for that. But the scammers are always creating new scams. And the best thing you can do on anything that is not your normal type of transaction with an absolute verified person at that point in time is talk to somebody else and slow it down. Now they talk about all those things with AI and the things they're creating, so it sounds like it is whoever political saying something that they didn't really say, or an actor, saying something they didn't say to get you to buy something or send money or have a feeling about them. And you have to find a way to kind of pierce that veil, pierce that costume, and see what's really going on there. And this is another reason to talk to people about money, because that can break through a lot of scams just by bouncing it off a wall of truth and reason.
One of the things that personally I worry about is when somebody, presumably from the bank or the insurance company, calls and they want your date of birth or something. And I really don't want to do that. Is there a polite way of telling them, hey, I want to call you back. I don't believe where you're from.
Well, if you can't figure out a way to do it politely, you can just hang up and then call on a verified phone number. Because if it's your insurance company, I'm sure they have sent you real bills over time and you have access to their phone number. If it is your bank, you have access to their phone number from an independent verified source. So if you get an email with a link, don't use the link. If it's got a phone number, double check that phone number independently. And if they call you, you ask how to call or contact them back, and see if the information they give you is real and true to the information you know. I have had those happen where I was called by a bank and I was like, you're not our bank. No, but we're working with your bank. Well, great. I'm going to call my banker and then I'll call you back, which I didn't end up doing because they weren't real. Anytime with any of the scams, with any of the, even if they get the right things and they say the right things, even if they have your date of birth, if they're calling and you didn't initiate contact, then you need to verify them before you give them more information.
Mary's asking, how do I learn about money? I first started paying attention when the Suze Orman had her TV show. I read her books and started saving more and spending less.
That's really what you do. I mean, this is where I put in a shameless plug and say, hey, you buy my book and follow me on social media and go to my website and read my blog and you'll learn everything. You probably won't learn everything. The biggest problem with financial literacy, whether we are talking Suze Orman or, oh boy, now his name escapes me, Dave Ramsey, or any of the people that are out there educating about financial literacy, and this includes myself, is that so many situations, so many people's finances and what they bring to the equation are different that no one has a one size fits all answer. So read books. That's a great way to do it. Listen to broadcasts. Take it with a grain of salt, even if they're the most ethical and educated person. That doesn't mean the information and advice they're giving is going to fit you specifically. So you want to keep reading until you find the voice that fits what you're looking for. And maybe when I talk about investing, I'm able to help you understand it better, but my budgeting doesn't make sense. And so you go to Dave Ramsey for budgeting, and something else that someone else says makes sense more, and you go there. And if you don't understand something, sometimes it takes a few different times hearing something and a few different ways of hearing something before it makes sense. But money is something we all deal with on a daily basis. Almost every decision we make in some way ends up having some financial component to it, one way or another, whether it's the gas we use to get there or the opportunity cost of what we might have been doing if we hadn't been doing that, that would have cost more or cost less or even earned us money. So find the voice that speaks to you, and don't be afraid to go look for another voice. But you can learn about money at any point in time. One of the most important things I learned working with people in finances is it had nothing to do with how old a person was, how educated they were, how smart they were. It had to do with all the other things about their baggage, what questions they were willing to ask, what things they paid attention to, as to how financially literate they were, how good of decisions they were making for themselves. I've known people with large six-figure income who are living month to month, are living paycheck to paycheck, because the decisions they're making are still in excess of the income they're earning. So it's really important to keep learning, keep listening, and to filter out the things that don't work for you. So the consequences of financial illiteracy are that you could end up with unsustainable debt burdens, or you have poor credit, which limits your opportunities, which will create you being an opportunity for a victim of a predatory lending situation. You're going to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to say this isn't really a question, but Barb says she received an email from Alita Blaze the other day, addressed to her and about 2 pages other people, claiming that they'd made a charge on her Amazon account that wasn't really hers. So apparently it wasn't a very sophisticated scam. I guess it's just a comment. I'm not sure you want to say anything back to you, Barb?
Well, certainly what you have to pay attention to is a lot of these scams are not being created here in the US. So sometimes just by reading the email, you can say, you know what, whoever wrote this, they just badly copied someone else. The things don't even make sense. And you can get it away from there. Or else you log independently onto your Amazon account and you see you made no purchases. It's just a matter of double checking and taking the time to do that. Nothing is that big of a rush. The IRS is not about to knock on your door. They really are not. But I've known financial professionals who have fallen for scams and lost from small amounts to large amounts because something seemed so real that they jumped and felt they had to react. We are not emergency room doctors. There's very little in the financial that has to happen immediately.
I'm going to paraphrase this next question.
Okay.
It's from Torben. And he says he thinks he learned a lot about money from reading a Bitcoin book. And I'm wondering what you think about Bitcoin.
So you're talking about the cyber currencies and Bitcoin and all of those, I assume?
Yes, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, but I think it's very different from most other cryptocurrencies. I just said that I read the book, The Bitcoin Standard, which also deals with the history of money, and that I learned a lot about the history from that book. And I can recommend the book.
Okay, so the Bitcoin, what'd you say?
The Bitcoin Standard.
The Bitcoin Standard. Okay. As far as the cyber currencies, whatever the cryptocurrencies, I consider them a fairly risky investment, and I'm not that. I'm a little more risk averse than that. That's just a personal feeling. People have very different risk tolerances as to how much money they'll put into different areas. And I know some people that have done very well on the cryptocurrencies, and I know other people that have lost a lot of money on the cryptocurrencies. But you can say that about most investments. I know people who have done very well in real estate and people who have just timed things badly.
Yeah, there are a lot of scams, and some people think Bitcoin is the new form of money that it's going to come and replace other things. But, well, I don't know, but I can only recommend that people try to learn about Bitcoin and make their own judgment.
I think that makes a lot of sense. You always have to make sure that you learn and that you're not just spouting something from someone else that you may not fully understand what or why they said it. We all bring our own baggage into our financial decisions, and it's important to recognize that baggage shades our perspective, and my perspective, no matter how educated about money I may be, is not necessarily your perspective. So even the things that I would say and do are not necessarily the things that would fit for you.
This is a great question from Natalie. She wants to know, how do I increase my credit score? Are the credit score companies legit? Is it something I can do on my own? I'm looking to buy a house within a year or two. That's the first time, and she needs her credit score up.
Okay, well, that's a complicated question because it would start from what your credit score is now, how much debt you have, how much credit history you have, and what are the things that have dinged you in the past. So if you have a lot of debt, that's going to increase your negative, so that's going to decrease your credit score. If you pay things late, that's going to decrease your credit score. So by paying things on time, that will help, and every month helps your credit score increase. The other thing is, some people don't realize that if you don't have a credit card, if you don't have bills of some kind in your name, you're not building your credit score. So if maybe you're a young person who doesn't have anything in your name and you're like, why is my credit score sitting here doing nothing? Because it has nothing to say, oh, look, this is someone who has credit and uses it responsibly. So those are things you have to kind of look at the individual situation to raise their score. But the basic things that create those ratios are you paying on time, and what is your debt limit versus how much debt you're carrying, and is it going up or down? You don't want to keep checking it too much, though. If you have a credit card, and possibly even your bank account has soft credit hits where they can kind of see what your credit score is at, and you can check those periodically. You don't want to check them too much. I recommend to people, because there are 3 credit agencies that you can use, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, and you can check each one of them one time per year. So I tell people every 4 months, you check a different one. And that way you're always seeing what's on your credit report, and you can dispute anything that's not correct. If it says you've got a credit card that you closed, if it says you had late payments that were not late, you contact that credit agency and you dispute them, and you see what you can do to correct them. I hope that helps, and good luck on your house.
This is Tim's the old 4 withdrawal from savings after retirement still applicable?
Well, so that 4% depends who you talk to, and of course it also depends how you invest. If you're getting a 4% or higher return and it's taxable, then 4% may be too high. If you're getting a 6% and it's not taxable, then 4% is certainly fine. It also depends what age you are and what other income you have coming in. But that 4% standard, there are people who are saying they should lower the general discussion to 3%. But it always depends what assets you have and how they're invested, whether any, I don't like any rules of thumb. Well, this is what you do, because every financial situation, every person's unique set of assets is different. So you have to look at your own situation.
And you addressed the 4%, but I also asked about long-term health insurance, whether or not you think that's a good idea. Because I paid for it for quite a while, and I thought, oh, to hell with it. I may only last like a year in one of those facilities, which I could probably pay out of the money that I've saved. But do you have any advice on that, please?
Well, the thing with all of the insurances, whether you look at long-term care or different types of disability insurance and all the various things offered by Aflac and whatever else, you're looking at, am I willing, what risk am I willing to take? So it's another investment based on your risk tolerance. Because, hey, if I break my leg so badly that I can't work for X number of months, do I want a duck quacking after me handing money that I already paid for? Or am I going to be able to afford it out of pocket? It's so many things that I talk about. I speak in generalities and I say, but you have to talk to a financial professional who knows your situation. So,
Right.
Are you likely to have a medical, there a history of it in your family that might have you ending up in a long-term care facility for a number of years? Are you likely to have, does your family have a history of buildings falling on them, and therefore you don't need any care?
Right.
I also like
Well,
to wear red shoes.
And we live in California, so there's a chance of getting an earthquake, which will take care of any problem there.
Right. You and your house will happily slide into the ocean and there's no long-term care needs. But,
Right.
but I mean, those are things you have to evaluate. And again, it comes down to your risk tolerance as to, am I willing to pay X hundreds of dollars a month or a couple of thousand a year to make sure that if something big happens, I'm covered? Because long-term care facilities, what are they? $10,000 a month or whatever, depending on the level of care you need.
Right.
And if it's for an extended period of time, that couple thousand a year is very, and if it's for, a couple of months, that annual premium was very expensive.
Nellie said she's having problems with her late payments. I believe. And she also has asked, are there any financial advisors that I can seek out? Well, of course, Marci Grossman would be certainly somebody you could look into. She says she's in the six figures, but just needs to know how to get the savings together. She says she's getting 3% from Chase Bank for savings. But I mean, I think the Treasury bonds are often like 5% at the moment, and they're safe.
They are, and there are certainly long-term CDs and whatever else. But having six-figure income doesn't do you any good if you have a larger six-figure expense. So the goal is you earn this amount and you spend this amount. And the difference between them, right, and the difference between them, you're putting in savings and investing. And if you have a significant amount sitting in savings, then maybe you look at investing. And if you are, if you don't feel you're wanting to really spend your time getting muddy and learning all the investments and choosing your stocks, then you look at either connecting with an investment advisor or buying into a mutual fund, which is essentially buying pre-pooled money that an investment advisor is already managing, but because he's doing it for a group that has said, hey, we want to invest in technology and we're this level of risk tolerance, or we want to invest in medical, or we're this level of risk, whatever it is. When you're buying a mutual fund, you're buying into the mindset of that manager who is a professional manager, and they're making those decisions for you. You can also just buy into an index fund, which essentially follows, maybe it's the Dow index fund, maybe it's whatever type of index fund, and they continually rebalance so that they have the same money, and your investments would essentially, they're not trying to beat the market, they're just trying to match the market. When you say financial advisor, I'm a CPA, so I prepare tax returns, and then I'm an educator, so I speak to groups and help them learn about money. In this case, we're talking about the overall concept of financial literacy, as opposed to, okay, let's teach you about budgeting, or let's teach you about whatever. So there are certainly classes you could take when you decide what specific part of money you want to learn about. But there are also, you want to hire the right advisor for what you're looking for advice on. Don't come to me for investments. I'm not a broker. Don't come to me for insurance. I can't sell you insurance. So, make sure you find an investor that you're comfortable with, that speaks to you in a way that you understand, that you're willing to ask questions. It is okay. There's no stupid question when you don't know something. And look for the way of learning what it is you want to learn.
Nally also asked, thank you for the thing about the treasuries. She would like to know how to get into the treasury account.
Kim? Hey, Kim. Wait, I'm sorry, but as many of us have commented in chats, is that this is turning out to be a personal one-on-one with a variety of people. And we're asking if we could handle all the general stuff first and then go into the personal stuff later. It would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, we can move along. So the consequences of financial illiteracy is picking up debt burdens, having your poor credit limit your opportunities, becoming a victim of predatory lending, and making costly financial errors that put you further into debt, which of course adds stress and anxiety. And, stress and anxiety make people spend money or not spend the time to make more informed decisions. And then there's the real cost of financial illiteracy, which is lower savings and investments, because you're making those decisions that don't allow you to have the money to save and invest. Higher debt and bankruptcy rates because you don't understand what you're doing. Wider wealth gap because you're not able to build wealth for yourself and potentially create and build generational wealth to give your children a chance to step up further. We all want better for our children than what we had for ourselves. And it's an estimated cost of about $1,819 per year as of a 2022 study by the National Financial Educators Council, but that's an average. So there are people who make no mistakes and there are people who make much bigger mistakes. But what happens is the people who can least afford it are the people who make the most expensive mistakes for themselves. This is a survey of states from across the nation about economic education. And economics, I don't know how many of you learned economics in school. You learned about supply and demand and how pricing works in a very minimal way in a classroom. But this is about economics. This isn't about personal finance. And as you can see from this graph, which is lovely color coordinated, is that schools teach it differently. Each state has different requirements. So depending on where you live is how much you understand about the general economics. And that's how we send our people out into the world and say, okay, here, you've got money. You now have money. What are you going to do with it? But what we have is we have different states requiring different things for financial literacy, which is much more specialized than the economics, because now we're talking personal financial literacy and the understanding of the individuals and the impact on the individual. This slide, so theoretically created March 11th per Ramsey Solutions, which is a much bigger organization than me. And this information isn't even correct because I live in Michigan and it lists that Michigan has financial literacy course for graduation. Technically, it's kind of correct because in the fall of 2024, for ninth graders that start that year, they're going to be required to have a personal financial literacy course before they graduate. Well, that means it's still not implemented until the high school graduates 4 years from now, 4.5 years from now. So how much of this can we take as to what it really understands when it was put together? I can find multiple of many different larger organizations and how they are saying, okay, this is what this state says and this is what this state says, and they're all incorrect. And because it hasn't been implemented in Michigan fully yet, there are still things that they're ironing out how it's going to be taught. This is what we're giving to our children, our grandchildren, as they move forward in the world. We're still ill-defined as to what financial literacy means, how we're going to impart that knowledge to them. And there are states with no requirement. You're in California, there's no financial literacy requirement. And that's sad because, as I had said earlier, you take a course to learn how to drive. You have to get licensed to be able to do so many different professions, and yet everybody gets money with minimal education. And here's the graph of what personal financial education looks like. And it's not the same as the other slide. This is again from the survey of states, which is different than Ramsey. The numbers aren't even the same. And the classifications aren't the same because we're all trying to get a handle on it as to what financial literacy means and how the best way is to teach it. But the schools are stepping up. If this is some of the more correct information, as of 2021, 8 states required a personal finance course to graduate. And in 2023, 25 states required a personal finance course to graduate, which is great. But the problem is so many people, you take that in high school, maybe you take it in 9th grade, maybe you take it in 12th grade, but you're not making those major financial decisions for yourself until you are 20 years old, 22 years old, 25 years old, depending on where your life path takes you. So how much are you remembering what you learned? And we've got to make financial literacy attractive as a lifelong pursuit if we want people to take it seriously and make those best decisions for themselves. And it's interesting because financial literacy has all of a sudden become a focus since the pandemic. And in my opinion, I think we were working toward it anyway. that it was starting to become part of the discussion. But I think, like many things, like Zoom meetings, that the pandemic helped people become more aware of the financial education disparity in the world, that those people who had it, maybe they taught it to their kids and maybe they didn't. But the people who didn't have it sure weren't able to teach it to their kids, how to better manage their money when they didn't necessarily have money to do that. So in that regard, this is, I don't want to say a positive thing from the pandemic, but certainly an eye-opening thing from the pandemic. Remember, there were the incentive payments from the government of $1,400 a person. There was if you were laid off or underemployed during the pandemic, you were getting $600 bonus on your unemployment. And that all of a sudden put money in the hands of many people who had not had that money. And depending on what they did with that money, they were able to make positive changes to their life. And here's my personal hamburger theory of personal finance, also known as lifestyle creep, which is when you earn $5, you buy a $5 hamburger. That's all you can afford. You go over to Burger King, Mickey D's, Wendy's, whatever, you buy what $5 will get you. But when you get an increase to $10, do you continue to buy that $5 hamburger and save and invest the balance? Or do you buy a $10 hamburger because it's a better hamburger and you can now afford it? And learning financial literacy helps you to understand what the difference is. What we have is too much of this, which is assuming you can read it clearly. Do you know what it means when all your financial statements are in red ink? And know that it's time to change the printer cartridge. So they don't understand the concept of what these statements in red ink, what these negative balances mean. So this is a 3-question financial literacy quiz that was used. Suppose you had $100 in a savings account and the interest rate was 2% per year. After 5 years, how much do you think you would have in the account if you left the money to grow? A is more than $102, B is exactly $102, and C is less than $102. I'll tell you that the answer is actually $110.41, which is more than $102. But if you don't understand compounding interest and how interest works, this could be a challenge. Second question, imagine that the interest rate on your savings account was 1% per year and inflation was 2% per year. After 1 year, how much would you be able to buy with the money in this account? A, more than today, B, exactly the same, and C, less than today. If you don't understand the way interest rate works and you don't understand the way inflation works, you may not understand that you can buy in 1 year less than you can today because the inflation number was higher than the interest number. And 3, please tell me whether this statement is true or false. Buying a single company stock usually provides a safer return than a stock mutual fund. If you don't understand about diversifying portfolio and managing risk and what it means, then you might think that this statement is true. It gives you the opportunity of a larger return. It also gives you the opportunity of a larger loss. So it is certainly not safer than buying a mutual fund. So these questions were created in the mid-2000s, and as of the mid-2010s, they were still in use. And there are multiple studies that talk about, as of 2014, 2015, only 1/3 of Americans surveyed got all 3 correct. These were 3 basic questions of financial literacy. College educated, 55.7% did not get all 3 correct. More than half didn't get all 3 of those questions correct. And high school educated, 81% did not get all 3 correct. Now they've adjusted the studies and the questions they put out. And obviously, anytime you put out questionnaires and polling, it depends on the quality of the people doing the polling, the people that answer the polling, how diverse of a group of people you have answering them. And so they're now asking more questions and they're working harder to try and get a more balanced polling group. But that's scary that 3 basic questions were so hard to me as a financial professional. That doesn't mean that all of you got all 3 of them correct, because you come from whatever backgrounds and you've learned whatever has been available for you to learn.
There are obviously a lot of great questions that people want to ask you, Marci, but there's also several people that would like to hear what you were planning on saying. You want to keep going with your presentation for a little bit, and we'll hold off on the questions for maybe an hour? Would that work?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I hadn't realized there would be so many questions. I'm flattered, I'm honored, and let's power through this, and then we'll have questions afterward. So this is just a general slide to think about. My short-term financial goal is to survive until Tuesday, and my long-term financial goal is to survive until Friday. And that's someone who maybe hasn't done much in the bigger financial planning, in getting their assets and expenses under control. So there are 5 financial literacy principles. I like to think of them more as categories than principles. And that is, you earn, you save and invest, you protect, you spend, or you borrow. Almost everything you do with money is going to fall into one of these 5 categories. So the first one is earn. And what we've got there is a Calvin and Hobbes cartoon that basically shows that it doesn't matter what you're selling, or whether it's your knowledge, your skill, or your product. If people don't want to buy it, it's going to be hard for you to earn money. So you want to pay attention to your earning. Are you earning what you're best capable of earning? And what are the decisions you could make that could increase your earnings? Save and invest. We can pay off our past and save for the future as long as we avoid the present. To save and invest, you have to make those tough choices. What am I going to spend and what am I going to put away for later? Because if you spend everything as it comes in, if you buy that $10 hamburger when you have $10, you're not going to be able to save and invest. And that gives you some of your future issues. Protect. If you follow my rules, you will never lose money. Rule number 1, never lose money. And that's where scams come in. You want to protect your money. You want to protect it from scammers. You want to protect it from bad decisions. You want to protect your money from all the different things and all the different people that are trying to part you from your money. So you want to take the time to think about, am I protecting my money before you spend? You want to, when any financial decision comes up, you want to try and figure out which of these categories, and some of them can go into more than one category. Which of these categories is this an earn? Is this a spend? Is this a protect? And make your decisions based on what are your goals of whatever this transaction might be. Spend. Oh, look, I saved money on Great Thursday, on Black Friday, on Small Business Saturday, and on Cyber Monday, and so it was Broke Tuesday. Sometimes you get so busy saving money by spending that it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem because there are so many things out there wanting our money, wanting us to spend on it. So you want to try and pay attention to what you're spending, where you're putting your money. And of course, borrow. And for anyone that has been in a position where they need to borrow money for a car, for a house, you'll know that they only want to loan money to someone that already has money. So have you got any collateral besides your heart of gold and $1 million smile? If you don't want to get ahead by borrowing money unless you have a plan that this is something that makes sense. I'm not opposed to borrowing money for things that make sense. I'll tell people that there are a couple of things you borrow money for. You borrow money for a house because not many people walk around with enough money for a house, or for a car, which is, unless you live in a city, in a state, whatever, that has a lot of public transit, you need a car to go to work, to do the things that earn you money. And you have to be willing for your health. One of my favorite jokes is a man is walking down the street and a guy comes up behind him and pulls out a gun and says, "Your money or your life?" And the guy says, "My life. I'm saving my money for my old age." I mean, think about where you're going. So your health is like that. If you save your money for your old age and you don't invest in your health, and if that means taking a loan or making a payment plan, if you've had to have a big medical thing, then your money doesn't really matter. So it's a matter of making those perspective decisions as they go. So those are 5 categories of financial literacy. And then here are the real goals of financial literacy: is to make better financial decisions, to be able to manage your money and your debt, to reach your personal goals, to reduce your stress and anxiety rather than having your money add to your stress and anxiety, and to build that generational wealth. Because ultimately, our really long-term goal of financial literacy, of managing our money, of building our portfolio, of having these good decisions behind us, is that when we get to retirement, we want to be able to spend money and not be trying to figure out how to spend time without spending money. Beyond the library, I don't know any place you can go for free and not have to worry about the money that costs there, and you still have to get to the library.
Okay. So in the area where I'm located, which is the South Bay, houses begin at about $2.3 million. So I'm 34, and in order to afford $2.3 million, a person would have to earn at least $600,000 a year. Very, very few people earn that. Even in the South Bay, I think that's a top 1% income. So what is actually going on here? Is this sustainable? Is this ever going to change? If so, why? And who's buying them now?
That is a great question. And I look at the price of houses, and here in Michigan, houses are much more moderately priced, and you can say the overall cost of living compared to where you are. But we're having that problem with our younger people. Even the things that were once starter homes, the real estate market has gone crazy, and I don't think it's sustainable. I'm not an economist. I'm not a real estate professional, so I can't say what's going to happen, but I don't think it's sustainable because income has not kept up. And there will come a point in time where people can't sell their houses. This goes into that supply and demand from economics. At a certain point in time, you can want 2.3 million for your house. If no one can afford it, who is willing to pay it, you're not going to get 2.3 million for your house. So there will be a bubble. We had that here, oh boy, what was that, 2008, I think, when real estate crashed. And I had a client who had just bought some houses he was going to use for rental property at the top of the market. And then the market crashed and he couldn't get the rent that he had hoped to get to maintain the property. I think it's coming. I couldn't begin to tell you when it's going to come, whether it will be a slow process or a large process, whether it'll be a gentle slope or just a cliff that all of a sudden the housing values are going to come off of. I do expect it to happen. Because that 2.3 million house probably is not what I think of as a 2.3 million house. That's probably a little more modest than what I think that amount of money should buy.
1,500 square foot, single story ranch house built in 1950 with 3 bedrooms. Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
the least expensive. They go up to about 3.2 for a relatively normal house.
Right, right.
And the weird thing is people are buying them. I don't know who.
But it's not sustainable unless the people who are buying it are landlords, or if it's the kind of house that they can put on an Airbnb, but then you've got to have enough people who will spend that kind of rent money to stay there. It just keeps coming back to that cycle of supply and demand. When nobody wants to pay it, then the price comes down. And until then, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what the price of housing has done.
Hi, Marci. This is Greg Carmichael. I wanted to ask a question about having investments managed. I have a 403B through my work. We have the option of just using Fidelity, just putting it into a fund. But I was approached, and there's a guy now that manages my money, and he takes 1% per year, 0.25% quarterly. And of the total value of the fund, not of the assets, not just growth. And I wondered, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a good idea? And what should I compare that to? How can I know if I'm getting, my money's worth by paying him to manage that as opposed to just putting it in a fund, like just a whatever comes with it through my employer?
So that 1% is about a standard rate, 1 to 1.5%, depending on how much you have invested. That is a standard fee for a managed portfolio with a individual money manager. If you stay in Fidelity, you would have to look at the funds you're invested in, because each of them has different fees and different times they charge the fee. Maybe it's when you put the money in, maybe it's annual, maybe it's whatever. They have their various fees. Everyone who's doing this is doing this to make a living one way or another. If you are using a money manager, you're more likely to have a single point of contact or their team. So a couple of people you can contact if you have questions, if you want to change, hey, I want to be a little more aggressive, or I want to be really aggressive on some of it and really conservative on some of it. So what you're paying for is that personalized approach. Whether they do better or not, I mean, what you could do is you could say, okay, if I took $1,000 here and $1,000 here, mathematically bring your portfolio with that money manager down to $1,000 and see where you are at a year. And if you'd have put $1,000 into a Fidelity fund that has the investment strategies that is in line with whatever your goals are, compare how they do at the end. I have people that say the best thing you can do is you just buy into a managed mutual fund, buy into a managed index fund, and let it ride, and you don't have the headaches, you don't have the whatever. But as you know, the Dow sometimes goes down, and any of those funds, the index funds that follow whichever market they follow, they're going to do very similar to how that does at that point in time. An individual manager is more likely to make adjustments to you than just, okay, we're following the Dow, and when it goes down, we go down with it.
Great. Thank you, Marci. I appreciate your time.
Sure. I see a question from Victor. Oh boy, I would say you need to talk to a cross-border professional, because you're going to have very specific goals as to where you are looking for the money to do which. So you want to talk to someone who is experienced in the various US, Canada questions that you would need to ask and have answered, as well as, okay, our goal is we're going to eventually retire here, or we're going to have 2 houses, 1 in each, or we're going to, whatever it is. Yeah. How to find someone's help. Well, you want to look for someone who is experienced in that. So you could call a CPA office, you could call an investment and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Is this something you do? And then ask for references, because before you give someone that kind of that they're going to be your expert on something, you want to make sure that they really are an expert in that. Well, Angel, that's an important point. As long as rent is higher than low interest mortgage, people will stay in the homes they own. But the problem is for the people that want to move from renting to owning, that that's hard to do. Even if your rent is high, you can't buy a house that doesn't exist. And we have bidding wars. I've watched as houses have gone to bidding wars and people have overpaid for houses in my area. We've been in our house for 30 years. We looked at moving 2 years ago, and based on what they were asking price wise and what they were offering for that price, I was like, you know what, it's not even worth the cost of moving. So yeah, it's crazy. In Sacramento, you're seeing the housing prices come down. That would be great. It would be nice if they came down gently as opposed to largely. I think it was Barbara Corcoran who from Shark Tank who recently said something about she expects that the interest rates are going to go down and the housing prices are going to go up. They're always guided by the interest rates because people say I can make a payment of $2,000 a month, and the market for interest rates and the market for house will determine how far that $2,000 a month will take you and what you'll be able to offer. So the interest rate becomes part of the equation. But I do think we're in for a shakeup because the prices are insane and someone has to be able to own the houses. At the rate they're going, there's going to be, oh boy, Elon Musk and Bill Gates are going to own all the houses in the world and no one else is going to be able to afford them. So, okay. Is there an agency to report monitoring scams? It depends on where you live and what type of scam it is. I mean, if I get an Amazon scam, I report it to Amazon. But there are so many different types of scams, and the ones that originate from overseas, there's not much you can do.
If you had a question in the chat that we missed, please either put it in again or put up your hand or give it verbally.
And Eric mentioned about California Proposition 13. So we had a proposition like that in the US. That's, oh boy. Prop A was 25 years ago or more, where when you buy a house, unless you do renovations that have them come in and reevaluate, your housing, your tax is limited to a 3% gain every year. So your house can have tripled in value, and if you've only lived there a couple of years, your tax has only gone up a small amount. They had thought this would be good for the schools without considering that when it went down, your house could go down in value by the full amount, but it could only go back up 3% a year. And it was not a good decision for the schools. So it depends what it's saying, what it's paying for, but it does stop people from buying and selling because all of a sudden you uncap that property tax calculation. Keep trying to come up with scenarios when the housing market crash. Well, that's true, except there comes a point in time where people can't buy it. And if they can't buy it, it's really that simple, because if a 1,500 square foot house is going for 2.3 million, me and my multi-billion dollars could buy it and not think of it, but what do I want with a $1,500 70-year-old house? So there's a point in time where reality will have to kick in, especially as the population decreases. Someone's got to buy that to take it down to make their mansion, or to take it down just because no one wants to buy it anymore. There has to. It's not realistic for the prices to keep going up the way they have been. But as I said, I can't say if that crash is a year from now or 20 years from now. I can just say in reality, there is no logic for it to continue doing what it's doing. So something has to happen. Well, that's true of home buyers that are in countries other than the US. They're using the purchase as an investment. But again, if they had to mortgage it, or they need to make a certain amount and the rent is too high, no one's going to live there. You don't want to have, you don't want to live in a place you can't afford. And there are talks of providing more affordable housing. What that looks like, I don't know, because that doesn't necessarily mean more affordable houses. But whether it's China or Russia or wherever that wants to buy expensive houses, unless someone wants to give you money back for it, it's not much of an investment.
Was there any other points you wanted to make, Marci? And are there any more questions?
Be willing to make questions. I'm thrilled that we had so many questions here, because that's how you learn. That's how you understand better what's going on. Find the ways to get the knowledge that you need, whether it's speakers on Zoom, whether it's reading books. Here, I'll shameless plug, read my book. Ta-da. Follow me, share your stories, and mentor someone else. If you've got someone that you can talk to about money, whether it's your partner and you're working together to improve your understanding, or whether it's a mentor that you have that you can ask questions, or someone younger, you could say, hey, have you ever thought about, or I want to tell you about this time that I did this great decision or this terrible decision and how it worked out, because we need to share our knowledge of finances, such as it is, so that we can help people improve their knowledge. Oh, absolutely. There's a link on my website. Let's see if I can get this clear. I think I'm in reverse, right? Money Marci, MoneyMarci. I'm available on Amazon. I'm even available at your library as a digital version. You don't have to leave home to download it onto your phone to read it for whatever the term of your library loaning is. And it's so important to learn about money. I collect stories that I share in my books and in my blogs. And if you have stories to share, I would love to hear them. And who knows, you might be helping to teach hundreds of people about money, given the possibility of remote work. Wait. Certainly, it's a possibility that billionaires crowd into the Bay Area. On the flip side, and yes, there are more billionaires now than there used to be, but the statistics say that people, the generational wealth typically is gone by the third generation, because even those people that have money don't necessarily spread their knowledge, either how they earned it or what they learned about it. And so there's a rotation. The hope is that next time around, I'll rotate into that higher income, or I'll position my kids to rotate in. But if you don't share that knowledge, all the progress you made could be lost. Oh,
So
thank you, Barb.
a question to everybody. I mean, we have people from all over the country here, I would imagine. We've heard comments about how expensive the Bay Area is, but I was wondering if anybody else would like to volunteer how much real estate is in their part of the United States.
I'm in Michigan, so it depends where you go as to what you pay for. But I'm in Oakland County, and I can tell you, driving through the county, there are some huge multi-million-dollar houses near me, but the ones that are a few million dollars are a lot bigger than 1,500 square feet.
But I was thinking, is it possible that we have somebody who's part of this meeting that can say, yes, you could, it's a possibility that there is affordable property in their part of the world?
I can give a little survey. I drove around the country about 3 years ago during COVID. Briefly, I settled in Alamogordo, New Mexico, which is a small town. The average income in Alamogordo is $24,000. You could get a house there when I got there for about $80,000 or about 1,200 square feet. By the time I left there a year later, this was during COVID, the same house would go for 120,000. Meanwhile, my parents live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They bought their house for I don't know what, but it's currently worth about $400,000. I think it's about 2,300 square feet. They say that the price has not effectively changed whatsoever since they bought it 30 years ago, which I suppose means the number was probably lower, but it kept up with inflation. They recently moved to Longboat Key, Florida, which is outside of Sarasota. They bought a condominium on the top of a condominium building, like quite a nice one, for $1.5 million, which has 3 bedrooms and is 1,700 square feet and is on a beach. That's what I know.
Right, but that condominium, again, you got the beach, so you are paying some for the location. And there are amenities, but they probably have a monthly condo fee to go with those amenities.
I'm sure. I think you can get a typical house like the others I was describing in interior Sarasota for about 400,000, or at least you could a few years ago when I looked at it.
I live in a suburb of Seattle, and Seattle's just gotten a little ridiculous. I bought my house 36 years ago for 62,000. I thought I was being a sucker, and now I listed at about 650,000 or something like that. My son was smart enough to buy a condo because he could afford that, even though he wasn't making much money, he could afford to do that. But the prices here are just, they've gotten absurd, frankly. It won't matter to me necessarily. I have no intention of moving. But I can't see somebody like a school teacher or a construction worker buying a house in this area. I just don't see how they could afford it.
Right, and condos are usually a little cheaper, but they also don't have the movement and growth that houses do. Their prices, unless you're talking about, a penthouse on the beach or whatever else. Normal condos just in regular types of areas, they don't have the growth of price that houses do.
Mm-hmm.
They still do grow, but it's not, a house price will go up significantly more than a condo price.
Yeah, well, he didn't particularly want the hassle of owning a house, and he wasn't making much money. He still isn't making much money. He's a night hotel clerk. You're not going to make a fortune that way. So,
Right.
but he did manage to buy it, and he has paid it off. He only paid, I think, 80,000 for it. So, he's a lot more sensible than I was at his age, put it that way. So,
Anybody else?
What might someone do in their late 50s, early 60s do to catch up or get in the game? you do the best you can. I mean, obviously, the best time to start saving money is yesterday. The second best time is today. So you do what you can. You put away money, you invest it, and you evaluate your expenses. For most people, it's easier to cut expenses than it is to increase their income. And so that's what you look at. People ask how much money they need to retire. It depends where you're going to retire and what you plan on doing with that retirement. So you just like anybody else, you do the best you can and you keep moving forward.
Wasn't there's something years ago I read about if you put money or you save money when you're 20 or 30, and you put so much money aside and then you don't save any more, but because of compound interest, you have a lot of money when you retire. And I don't remember what the actual numbers were, but they were really making a point.
Well, yeah, and that's not just compound interest, but the dividends and growth you get in stock investments, which are typically much higher than you would get in bank CDs or in money market funds or whatever, treasury bonds. So yes, the more money you put away earlier, where it has that time to continue that growth. And I know the study you're talking about, though I don't remember the dollar amounts offhand. The earlier you put it away, the more that money is worth. A dollar 10 years ago invested is worth significantly more than a dollar invested now. A dollar you invested when you were in your 20s versus one in your 40s versus one in your 60s has that much more time to grow. But you start from where you are. You can't change the past unless you've invented a time machine. And if you have, I'd like to borrow it. But you do the best you can. You start from where you are and you pick up and you go forward.
The other thing that struck me is letting it ride. Because of course, just what was it, 2008, 2009? I think there's some people who had to sell, whereas I didn't. I wasn't necessarily intelligent. I just didn't do anything, and it went back up again.
Well, and the other thing is if you sell when it's down, you've lost. So the time to sell is not when the market is down. The time to sell is when the market is up. And if you react, oh no, the price went down, I should sell now, and oh, the price went up, I should buy now, you're off cycle and you're going to always lose money in the end from that. Nellie?
Oh, yes. So, hi. I was going to comment about Sacramento house pricing for those that are interested living in the Bay Area. Right in Sacramento, you're able to build your own home around $400,000 to $500,000. So like a little tiny mini mansion. So I have a lot of friends that live here, but they work in the Bay Area. They either commute or work remotely. So that's, a little something for people that live in the Bay Area. Just a little advice. But yeah, prices are insane right now. Although in Sacramento, it is going lower, though the interest rate right now I noticed is about around 7.25. Yeah, you need to have two incomes necessary. I'm in the six figures and it's tough. My God. Just can't qualify. It's really tough.
Perhaps the situation is exacerbated by the large cluster of people who are in their early 30s who now, like me, want to buy a house for the first time and are all showing up at the same time. Also,
Yeah.
decrease in household size during COVID, or so I've heard. Nearly everywhere, people who were doubling up in buildings separated out during the brief weakness in the housing market and now have their own places and don't want to sell them.
That's true, but I also know a lot of people that moved back home, to their parents' house, to that area, because it was cheaper and they could save going back out and venturing back out to find these places because they made a lot of money. They were at their parents' house. They weren't, because that way they wouldn't have to be alone. And yet they felt relatively safe or safer. And now they're looking to buy, and they're all like you, trying to find houses where they work or where they want to live. And so that's driven the market up as well. It's a lot to think about. I mean, we covered a lot of basic financial literacy topics. As I said, you can certainly reach out to me. I'd love to hear your stories. I can't be everybody's financial advisor because that's not really what I'm doing. I'm going out and I'm educating people, and I'd love to think that I made a difference and helped you learn a little bit more about money and a little bit more about who to go to answer the questions that you have. Thank you, everybody that came out and asked questions. I appreciate it. I think you made it more interesting for people and even for the people that didn't necessarily want to share at this point.
Thank you, Marci. It's really been great having you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And we hope that maybe in the future we'll have you talk again.
That sounds great. I'd look forward to it.